Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates. And this is my Seattle housing market watch for January 22nd, 2025. Well, as we jump into this week's housing market watch, we're in the second to last week of January. We've seen some more listings coming on the market, but not very many in comparison to the needs. And so we're still finding ourselves in a situation where we're in super low inventory. In fact, I had a client that I set up a search for the other day, and there were literally 2 listings that showed up in their entire search criteria. And their budget is modest, but it's within the normal first-time home buyer budget. And it was really interesting just to see how little inventory there was for what they're looking for. And over the last year, there have been 90 houses that have sold that would have fit this same criteria generally, loosely, but 2 houses that are on the market, and they've been on the market for a while, and neither of them really are a good fit. I had to remove one of the criteria. Without removing the one criteria, there were 0. So I think that as we're looking at what's out there right now, it is bleak if you're a buyer. There's really not a lot of supply, but if you are thinking about making a purchase, this is when you want to start having conversations with a real estate agent. This is when you want to get your mortgage pre-approval, because there are going to start to be more houses coming on the market, and that's going to start end of February, March. And so if you're ready to go, you're going to be able to take advantage of some of that as the market starts to pick up, as more houses are becoming available. If you wait until then, you'll be behind the other people that are already ready to go and have been looking, maybe starting in the holiday season. So I would advise getting started with that now. And as I mentioned, there's just not a lot coming on the market. We saw, 5 more houses in King and Snohomish County come on the market than last week, 404. If we look back a year, there were more houses that came on this year versus last year, right? There were 344, there were 404 this week. So in the same week last year, considerably more houses came on the market. But what's interesting is we saw more pendings this year than we did last year, 625 versus 596 last year, and considerably more than last week, 556. And so even though the amount of houses coming on the market is still low, we're seeing a lot of those coming off the market or getting closer to sold. If you're new, the pending sales are houses that are currently either pending inspection, which is about half of the pending sales, maybe a little more. Those coming closer to sold, going directly pending, or houses that just were off the market from active into the pending status. So it's not exactly a 1-for-1 correlation, but it's a decent metric to see, okay, how much is heading towards the sold listing status, which we had a few more closings as well this week. Normally, the bulk of the closings are going to happen at the end of the month. There will be closings each week, and then you'll see an uptick as we get towards the end of the month, or even the beginning of the next month for those that roll over into the next month. So what are we doing here with rates? So rates have been hovering around 7% for a while now. They've dropped down a little from about 7.25% a few weeks back. We are looking at rates today on Mortgage News Daily's survey. This is 7.08. 7.08 as of 1/21. So this would have been yesterday's report. And as we're looking at last week, we saw a slight drop, right? We're about 7.13 last week in the video. And then last year, 6.92. So rates are slightly up from where they were last year, but relatively the same. And so we're seeing similar listing activity so far. We're seeing similar pending activity. I'd argue slightly more, but about the same. And rates, again, about the same, slightly higher. And we talked about in the predictions for 2025, and that's a video you can find on the YouTube channel if you want to go see what I had to say more in depth. But I think the general thought is that this year will mirror last year a lot. We're going to see similar amounts of listings. We're going to see similar amounts of sales unless something changes dramatically, right? Rates have stayed in this same realm for a while now. I don't see any reason why rates are going to come down this year. I think the shift in the political party and the president-elect is going to affect this a little bit. I think the Fed's been saying, hey, we're going to be slowing this down a little bit. We're not going to continue dropping rates as much. I think there's been some up and down inflation data too. Hey, we didn't get it under control. Oh, maybe we do have it under control. So I think there's enough uncertainty here where we're not going to see as much change right away in the year. Maybe towards the end of the year, we'll have a little bit better picture. Maybe we will start to see rates coming down. I think some are predicting maybe the low sixes, but last year we saw that too. So we saw a fluctuation in rates. We saw rates getting around 6. We've seen them over 7 in 2024. 2025, I wouldn't expect it to be much different. I bet we'll have a little bit of volatility there depending on the sentiment of the markets. So for this year, I would say we're going to see something similar to last year, which means we're going to start to see more of the listings coming on the market, but it's not going to be an explosion of listings. We're not going to see more than normal. I think a big part of that is these higher rates. We've, for the last 2 years, had fewer listings than a normal year around here. A lot of that because of the difference in rate. People are holding on to houses and not selling them because they have lower rates. And that's not necessarily a bad plan, right? If you've got a great mortgage right now and you're 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%, you might not ever see that again. And so some people are choosing to continue living in their house and not make a move. Some people are staying in their houses and making that move, but then just keeping it as a rental property. Again, not a bad strategy. I made a video. It's gotten a lot of views and a lot of negative comments around not keeping your house as a rental property. That video was intended to be a counter to what most people would say is, hey, keep your house as a rental, because it doesn't always make sense for everybody to keep their house as a rental. I did not keep a house as a rental. I sold a primary residence. So there's some benefits to doing that. There's also benefits to keeping it. And that's why so many people right now are not selling their former primary residence. And so as we're looking at 2025, I think we're going to see a lot of what we saw last year. I think as a buyer, getting ready to go now is going to behoove you. If you're a seller, getting on the market earlier in the spring is probably going to benefit you as well, given what we saw last year. As inventory starts to build, if there's not as much pressure on pricing, that's when you start to see houses sit for longer. That's when you start to see houses selling for below asking price. So as a buyer, you're going to want to be patient because there will be opportunities later in the summer, historically, or even the fall, where houses are sitting a little longer, there's more options, and maybe you don't have to pay the premium over asking price. But again, usually for the sellers, you're going to see prices start to peak and the competition peaking mid to late spring. So getting on earlier rather than later is going to benefit you on that end as well. So if you have any thoughts or questions, please drop them in the comments. You can also feel free to reach out to me. If you have questions about your own personal situation or you're thinking about maybe buying or selling here in the greater Seattle area, I'd love to be a resource for you.